is war inevitable between India and Pakistan in the next 5 to 10 years?
Not sure if it's inevitable per se, and I hope it's not. But I think what it seems the experts are saying is that what happened this time, in a way, the escalator ladder has been climbed, and the Indian Prime Minister sort of said that we have not called, it's not an end to the operation, it's a pause to the operation. So if you think of the sequence of events which happened from 2016, when India first sort of, as a policy, said that we are happy to go into Pakistan, either in Kashmir and this time it was even outside Kashmir, that we would take out terrorist infrastructure. It first started with a surgical strike across the border by ground troops in 2016. In 2019, it went to an actual airstrike on terrorist infrastructure. And in 2025, it's moved up to airstrikes and missile strikes, including trying to hit Pakistan bases. So every step of, he has gone up to the escalator ladder. And so if there is, God forbid, and I think none of us would want any episode of that. And the Prime Minister said that, look, if every future act of terror is going to be considered as an act of war. So you will have to start essentially at, if you think that this is deterrence, and if there's another terror attack, well, the deterrence wasn't sufficient. So it has to be an even stronger message. So in that sense, from these statements, you think that, that is the message being sent out. And I think probably all of us should hope that, look, that's not in actual what's going to happen. Between two countries, the DGMOs will first talk, there'll be the pullback, and you'll essentially what's called reset the escalation ladder to zero. And, we can start from a sort of a none for none.
Do you believe they are terrorist attacks?
Yeah, the terrorist, if you define terrorism as targeting non-combatants,
Right, yeah.
Then clearly Pahalgam is a terrorist attack. There's been multiple such. I think what's been very alarming in the last 3-4 years in Jammu and Kashmir in India has been that there's been a lot of attacks on civilians. There's been rising incidences against the army, but there's also been targeting of civilians, especially outsiders who are not native to Jammu and Kashmir. So there's been attacks on laborers who have come from different parts of India to work on, say, infrastructure projects.
Tourists.
And this time it was tourists. It's not that it's never happened before. It's very rare, but it is terrorism straight out because you are targeting non-combatants. I don't think we can, there's any disagreements on that.
Yeah, there's innocent civilians. Yeah.
These are non-combatants. Simple. I think that was a big source of outrage, and I think the fact that it really shocked civil conscience is very evident in that even in Kashmir, there was a candlelight vigil. There was essentially a strike within Kashmir in protest of what happened in Pahalgam right after that day. It was a lot of outrage even within Kashmir.
The reason why I asked the initial question was, it seems to me, for the last 20 years, every 5 or 7 years, tensions rise. We all freak out. We all say, there's a nuclear war happening, and then tensions come back down, and then it happens again, and it comes back down. So do you think, at a certain point in time, they're going to have to confront the bigger reality if they don't solve the differences that they have?
Yeah, no, that is very correct. I think what's the tensions, again, through my lifetime, the tension has always been there. But I think there's something which has changed, again, at least in my lifetime. So starting from the, 90s, when, I've sort of slowly been following, or at least been aware of these events happening. This is probably the period from 2016 onwards. This has probably been a period when there has been very minimal dialogue between the two nations. What happened in the 90s was there would at least be efforts to have dialogue even after major incidences. So if you think of like 1998, you had the prime minister of Mr. Modi's party, in the first time they were in power. He started this bus diplomacy, goes to Lahore, meets the elder brother of the current prime minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif. And after that, this war in Kargil happens. But then once Kargil dies down, General Musharraf comes to India. And they can't agree on anything, but he still comes to India. He even goes to his his childhood home in Delhi. He has this very emotional reunion with, I think, the lady who would take care of him as a child. Goes to Agra, but then nothing happens. He goes back. The parliament attack happens. Both countries mobilize, but then right before elections, Prime Minister Vajpayee makes another effort at Pakistan. The Indian cricket team goes to Pakistan, and then you have this bonhomie of India-Pakistan relations, which gets disrupted in 2008 with this. But then it keeps going to the extent that Prime Minister Modi turns up unannounced in 2015
in Pakistan
at Nawaz Sharif's birthday.
Right.
But then there's
kind of wild.
Yeah, then there's been you just show up. Party. Right? I mean, this is apparently a very tough right-wing, majoritarian, no-nonsense leader.
Yeah.
But I think what's concerning is that then there's been almost a complete freeze. And certain things, which, for instance, India and Pakistan, even on sort of the one of the biggest things two things they probably share in common, at least North India, is one is cricket, the other is Bollywood. Now, those have also been suspended.
Right.
In the 90s, India and Pakistan never played cricket or rarely played in each other's country, but they would play in Sharjah. They would play all the time in Sharjah. They even played 3 tours in Canada.
Really? In Canada?
Yeah, Canada. There was called the Sahara Friendship Cup.
Wow.
In 96, 97, 98. 3 editions of it happened.
Wow.
In Canada, in Toronto. Because, they won't play in each other's countries, but at least they went and played abroad. That is gone. And there's every time there is this, this time India just refused to play in Pakistan, just complete, and in an ICC event. That didn't happen in the 90s. Then, similarly, like, Bollywood actors are just, or Bollywood is in a way just shunning Pakistani artists, which again was not as
prevalent.
It was this much hostility was not there. So I think the dialogues have come down a lot, which is concerning, because then how do you want to, how can you move forward?
We were talking about this briefly a couple weeks ago. I think it's part of the reason why is because extremism in both countries have risen, and it seems to me that people that had the most extreme views in both countries are in positions of power, and so nothing really is getting done. Do you agree that it's because of these extremist ideals in both countries, or is it just a natural phenomenon of not talking to your neighbor?
So domestic politics, of course, has a role, especially, I think, and that's very true in India, because, for instance, in 2019, the Prime Minister Modi, who was up for re-election, got a lot of political mileage out of Balakot. The strikes he ordered.
What was Balakot for?
This was the strikes he ordered after the 2019 terrorist attack in Pulwama, where I think about 30 CRPF troops were killed. He ordered these strikes, and that was when the following Imran Khan was Prime Minister. The following day, one of India's planes got shot down. The pilot was captured. But he drew a lot of mileage, and if I remember correctly, he sort of said that he essentially appealed to the young voters of the country and said, a lot of first-time voters, can I request you to give your first vote for the armed forces of the country? That was essentially his messaging, and this whole thing of we can actually hit terrorists in their homes, and we'll not take this lying down. So there's political mileage, but there's an interesting counterpoint to this as well. When this is drawn from this, I remember there was this interview by this person called Shekhar Gupta in India, who was a very senior journalist. He would do these things called walk the talk, and he did this interview with kind of what somebody can be called as Mr. Modi's political mentor, Mr. L.K. Advani, who was once Deputy Prime Minister of India under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And, I think Shekhar Gupta opens his interview asking that, are you surprised that some of the most, in some ways, the resumption of India-Pakistan ties in the 90s came under a BJP government. And he said, I'm not surprised one bit, because I felt that the BJP government is serious about solving this issue. And in some ways, if you think of it, a right-wing government will be less susceptible to political backlash of selling out to Pakistan. A right-wing government will be not like they have in that way, like, if it's not, or if it's a non-right-wing government like a Congress government, if they strike a deal with Pakistan, it's very easy for the right wing to target them as being soft on Pakistan. But it's much harder if today Mr. Modi decides to open up relations with Pakistan, which say Mr. Vajpayee did in 2003 after the parliament attack, 1.5 years later. And there was a full mobilization of the army at that time. He in fact used this term, I believe. He told the army that this will be a fight to the finish. It was almost like, and there was this huge mobilization of the army for a year and a half, and almost a stare down at the border. But he opens up in 2003. He probably had more credibility to do that than, say, a Congressman Manmohan Singh would have had. So in that way, it's also an opportunity, because, again, they are less susceptible of being selling out. It's harder to critique that.
Because you can compare that to America as well. Like, Donald Trump would be less susceptible to criticism that he's selling out American interests when his entire motto is "Make America Great Again."
Yeah. So
right-wing governments have that inherent power.
They have that advantage. They can portray it, because a lot of
say they're less patriotic.
It's because a lot of times, a lot of international relations, you also have to sell it back to your country.
Right.
You will have to sell those to your country as well, because if your domestic constituents become very unhappy, it's hard to carry. You have to carry your nation along.
Do you think both countries struggled to sell this war to their constituents this time around?
No, I think it's. So I'm going to quote this person called Sushant Singh, who is I think right now in Yale I think he's a postdoctoral scholar or something in Yale. He was in the military, and he's a sort of a defense analyst. I think he said, and it's true. I think the first part I completely agree. Both countries have done an amazing job at selling this, whatever happened in those 5 days, as a glorious military victory. In some ways, probably the biggest beneficiary of this whole thing is General Asim Munir, who recently got promoted to a field marshal.
Right, which is insane. It's only been done twice in the country.
Who it seems probably was a pretty, and I think the first one was self-appointed, with Ayub Khan.
Ayub Khan, right? That's right.
I think kind of appointed himself.
He did it when he was dictator.
So this is the civilian leadership.
It's the highest level that a military officer can hold.
And this is, I believe, he was a fairly unpopular general. Because he had issues with Imran Khan. So this person has suddenly become a national hero.
Right.
And, India has also claimed military victory about this. So in that sense, both countries have been able to convince their domestic constituents that we have a victory. And that probably made the ceasefire possible as well. If either country would have been seen as losing, they probably would have had to do one more round of operations to convince that, no, we didn't, we negotiated from a position of strength than a position of weakness.
So interesting.
In that sense, I think, again, if you think of international observers, like the New York Times, I think what they kind of say is that the first night, the Pakistan got sort of a bit of an upper hand in the air war, in that India might have lost some planes, and then but on the fourth night when India hit back, and I think. Some observers will believe that it was kind of a bit of anger at especially the Pakistan air defense system that caused that hitting back. The hits right deep into Pakistan, near Rawalpindi or Sargodha. Those were, if not, maybe the damage can be recovered quickly, but that's a strong message that, look, we can, no airfield of yours in many ways is out of range. And that was a strong message. And, and your missile interception system is not perfect. We can still, you probably could have caught a lot of our missiles, but we still, if we send enough, we can get through. And that's also a strong message in some ways sent out.
Right.
So I think that was kind of, if you think of military takeaways, it seems, if you think of international observers, that's probably where things ended up.
My fear was ballistic missiles were launched from, and India launched ballistic missiles, and then Pakistan, I think, launched counter missiles. That was the most concerning part for me. about the war.
Yeah, because India did use BrahMos missiles. So which are
right, it's ballistic.
No. Those are I think traveling at Mach 5 or some speed like that. So of course, and if you think like at the end of the day, I think there was this article by Sushant Singh said this on an interview with the Hindu yesterday that if you think of the Soviet Union and the US, you had about 12-13 minutes. India, Pakistan, you don't even have that much time to respond because the distance, Lahore and Amritsar is 40 kilometers, right?
So it's like literally immediate.
Yeah. Which makes it an even bigger problem because I think that the real concern, which is why the US stepped in, is you sometimes can misinterpret certain statements or movements or intelligence
100%.
reports. And then, let's say you misinterpret intelligence report that, you just get that, okay, some military, weaponry X is being moved. And they were like, oh, wait, if it moves here, it can target this. Okay, let me take it out right away before they can do it. And then maybe you preempt something wrongly and you trigger off some chain. I think that's a real concern. But in a way, I think both countries sort of also showed off, I guess, what they have, what they have in a way.
Where most of the budget goes,
and I think in some ways for Western observers, I think they also got a sense of what the Chinese capabilities are. CNN had a long article about because China supplies Pakistan has about 80%
Where does
of its
India?
military.
India gets from
It's
Israel?
a mix. It's a mix. So India has, if you think of India has used, the sort of flagship aircraft right now is the Rafale, which is French. But the India still uses a lot of Russia/Soviets operated stuff, which is the Sukhois and the MiGs. India has also, I think they still use Jaguars from the US. They were using Israeli drones.
Right. Yeah.
It's a mix. And I think what, again, some observers think that this in some ways might make India at a slight disadvantage because it's hard to integrate
all the different technologies
across these systems. Whereas Pakistan, because everything, about 80% from China, you can integrate this whole thing.
But then couldn't you also say India also has an advantage because they're not dependent on one country as a whole? Because Pakistan and China, if they start to have fights, it's over for Pakistan. But India, because they have so many trade partners and bilateral relationships, they can afford to, have weaponry and arms from various nations.
It depends on, I think, how each country or how the countries are aligned to each other. So in the 60s, for instance, in 65, there was an India-Pakistan war during Ayub Khan's time. It was in some ways pretty easy to stop that for the West because neither country had indigenous weapons manufacturing.
Right.
So what the West and the Soviet both said is, we will not give you spare weapons. And within 20 odd days, the war had to be kind of, had to declare ceasefire because both countries realized that, okay, we don't have as much, parts left over to continue the war. But today, the West definitely can do that with India. They can use that as a lever if they would like. Will China do that with Pakistan? I mean, they have had extremely close ties over the last, and this, I think, become stronger and stronger over the last few years. And India and China have also had border clashes in the last 5 years.
Very, yes. So it's very intense,
Yes, it is in that sense. I think this person called Ajay Sain, who's a counterterrorism and defense expert in New Delhi, said in a recent interview to the Newsweek, said that if there is an India-Pakistan conflict where we started off this conversation, let's say that happens, I mean, India always relies this that, okay, they have conventional superiority. That is the India sort of trump card. I think we are a bigger country, and
more people, right?
More people and larger army. So we conventionally can dominate Pakistan. And he was like, if China even mobilizes its army on the northern front, India will have to immediately divert half its troops.
Right.
And you're at conventional parity with Pakistan right away.
Yeah. And strategically, it would be hard to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sushant Singh said that no country has ever won in a two-front war. Look at Hitler, look at Napoleon. They'll never win a two-front war. So I think that defense relations between China and Pakistan are actually very close, and it's not very certain if, let's say, if today, for instance, if the West tries to control assertive India by saying, okay, look, we are going to not give you weaponry for if you do this. Will China reciprocate that? Probably not. Or well, maybe not. Because it just seems that they have, and because they have been doing these joint exercises also regularly. China and Pakistan.
What seems to me, what I'm just like concerned about the most is, despite these two countries being very similar, in their culture, in the language as well, I just don't understand why. I mean, this is maybe the naive part of me speaking, but isn't it in India's interest and Pakistan's interest to just have friendly relations and have a good, healthy trading relationship? Don't both countries benefit from a mutual cooperation?
Yeah, and I think there's I think one thing which both countries are facing together, and they're going to be facing more, which is climate change. I mean, if you think of between November and February from Lahore to Delhi, you can't breathe.
Lahore has the worst air quality in the world. The city of Lahore.
And it's the same problem. There is essentially like a lot of these places, they have, you have farm fires, you have vehicular pollution, and you are located in an area of the world which is subject to extreme climate change. So, these are places where you can think. So I believe, I hope I'm not mistaken, but I believe last year, for instance, the Pakistan Punjab, I think, government said, maybe we should talk to the Indian Punjab government, irrespective of what our countries do, because we have to settle this together. We are essentially,
it's the same land, yeah.
Yeah, the wind doesn't exactly care for the international border.
Right.
They will. The pollution matter doesn't
Let's go
care.
to the Indian side more.
Yeah, you can't control that.
Right.
So you have to jointly tackle this.
Right.
So no, it's obviously it makes, and again, if you think of
and what's happened since that conversation?
Well, I think it's just it's just hard to. Yeah, in any case, I think I'm not sure about Pakistan, but sadly. Environment and climate change are just not talking factors in a political debate in India.
Right.
It's very unfortunate, but that sadly, it only shows up when people can't breathe, and then there's a lot of talk. And
even then, I think, just like you said, political debate, it's a lot of ego that's being spoken, right? That's why there's, in my opinion, what you said, I think ego takes a forefront over everything in politics and power, and so I don't see why the people in power would even care. I mean, they're willing to sacrifice thousands, if not millions of people to settle a war that's been going on for a long time, right? So it's like, why would the environment even take consideration?
Yeah, but sometimes you can use maybe the ego for your own, the ego might also help, right? Like, I think, for instance, why is President Trump so very interested in solving India-Pakistan? He probably sees it as a very easy way to get a nuclear peace prize. Like a Nobel Peace Prize.
Did you see that? The odds are 11% for Trump to win the Nobel Peace Prize right now.
I mean, if he can somehow arm twist India-Pakistan to come to the talking table, yes. And I think this
he
is
has
also
to solve
where
the Israel war first, though. He has to make peace there.
This is where I think it's also kind of nuanced, right? Like, politicians also at times want to care about legacies. And let's say, especially if you're towards the end of your career, let's say you end up as the politician who sets up a legacy that, oh, you know what, I set out the formula which brought 30 years of enduring peace between nations X and Y. That's a pretty attractive proposition for a politician. In some ways, it's possible. I mean, so for instance, like 2003, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee makes this very unexpected announcement that we are going to have resumption of normal, he says that this is my last effort to mediate between India and Pakistan. He said, this is Vajpayee in India. He said, this is my last effort I'm going to make to mediate between these two countries. He was probably in some ways also looking at some legacy building. He said, this is my last elections coming up. I'll never fight again after this. And this is the last shot.
Like
2003, I think he was, he was, I think, probably also looking for, okay, is this my last chance as Prime Minister to do something about this?
Well, Modi's this is his last term, right? As well, like 5 more years, but
there's no term limit in India.
There's no term limit.
There's no term limit. You can be Prime Minister a number of times if you are successful. His party has an internal rule that if you cross 75, you shouldn't be in a party post.
75 years of age.
75. It's not a very hard rule.
Interesting.
And he's hitting his club, closing in on the date.
Right
So he's closing in, but whether it will be applied to him or whether he will be an exemption to this sort of ethics. It's not a very hard rule also, but that's to be seen. But yeah, no, I mean, again, he also can think of it. I'm not sure, but I think he might have moved a bit further on the muscular side too.
Yeah, I'm not super aware of honestly of the socio-cultural of India, right? But it seems to me that they're very prideful and they're very like nationalistic, right? Would that be accurate or no?
I mean, certainly a fairly large section, is
right.
Is there.
So how, would they favor Modi if he wanted like a peace between them? Because they're obviously not a fan of Pakistan.
I think, if not, again, it's hard to sort of say. I think overall, though, especially on the border, I think most people would like things to calm down.
They're nervous.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody wants to live with blackouts every night and
shootings,
and drones flying over your head and artillery shelling going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's coming, right? Like, so I think you did see a lot of, especially in those 4 days after the first night, you did see quite a few rather panicky messages on social media on the border saying that, look, these are these, and the drones, it seems that the drones which came on the first 2 nights, they seemed more to cause panic than actually cause a lot of harm. But it's not a very reassuring sight to see air defense guns blazing away at night, and there's pitch dark. I'm not sure if people in Amritsar would like a prolonged like 10 days or 15 days like that in a full-fledged
Why not
war.
a couple years?
So yeah, or well, I guess that the more concern is that it's this, you're in a sort of you have what is called a hot international border, where it's not even a declared war, but there are regular violations of ceasefire.
Yeah.
And there is, so it's not even that that okay, 15 days and we are done. It's more like, yeah, as you said, 3 years, and it's still like once every 3 days or 5 days there is a drone showing up in front of our house.
So if a war does happen, is nuclear power inevitable?
You would hope not.
No, but what's reality?
But again, no, it's, both countries have it. So again, the reason why a lot of countries, and the reason why Pakistan probably justifies its nuclear weaponry is that, okay, in a way it's an insurance against it's an insurance against war,
right?
That, okay, because we are conventionally, we are not going to be a match for India, but this will deter India. It is a nuclear deterrence, which is where the term comes from. That, okay, because once you the question or at least international relations experts will agree, we will think that once you have the nuclear weapon, it's a deterrence against war, because you really can't afford to have 2 nuclear weapon states.
There's no war between 2 nuclear powers.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen. Again, if you think of it, the Soviet and the US, they managed to not have a war for about 40 years. It's not that they didn't fight each other. They fought by proxies. But they ensured that there is no direct conflict between those 2 powers, and they somehow managed to sort of calm those things down and not get in situations. So yeah, but I think here's the concerning part, which if you go by the statements of the Indian Prime Minister, you have said that the operations are paused, not suspended. There's a ceasefire, but you also have a nuclear threshold. So you don't want, so I think basically both sides, and it's true for both India and Pakistan, I think in this whole 4-day episode, both sides were calculating that, okay, what is the maximum damage we can do without provoking a massive retaliation from either side. That's probably also in some ways the calculus which goes in for terrorist groups. If you think that, okay, there's probably some handling from Pakistan that, okay, we would like to hit India, but we don't want India to get so annoyed that they go and go out and do some extensive damage. Similarly for India, and which is why on day 1 India mentioned this after the strike. They said that this is non-escalatory. We are not targeting military targets. Our fight is not against the Pakistani people, the Pakistan military, because they didn't want a response. They were like, you stay out of it. We don't want to fight. we are only taking out terrorist infrastructure, which we think you are unable to contain yourself.
I think going back to the question about like the longevity of the conflict, I don't think tensions will ever resolve unless and until both countries change their cultures. Like I lived in Pakistan for 12 years, and when I lived there, India was always portrayed as
The
like
devil?
an enemy country. Not the devil, because we used to see Bollywood films, and we still idolize Shah Rukh Khan and all of the Bollywood stars, and we love Indian cricket players. But whenever India and Pakistan cricket match was happening, it was like life and death. Like I still remember the 2011 World Cup where India beat us in the semifinals, and I just like literally wept. I was like, this. I thought like I died that day, a part of me. But it's like it's so severe that in schools, the nationalistic part is so emphasized, and India is clearly the front and center nemesis. And I'm sure it's the same case in India. Like Pakistan is, a very bold nemesis, and we must stand up to Pakistan. But I think if we see a neighboring country as an enemy, when the kids grow up, they're not naturally just going to be like, oh, these are our brothers, and we used to be the same. It's like I think it's like America and Canada. When a Canadian comes here, we don't see that as an enemy. We're like, oh, this is the nicer version of us that we couldn't be.
I think even adding on to that, if there were political like cohesion, like, oh, India and Pakistan are at the table, they're talking, everything's good, doesn't mean the people are going to be good with the other countries, right? There's still going to be terrorists in Pakistan that still hate India, right? And what is India going to do if terrorists are still attacking Indian civilians? I mean, they're going to probably retaliate. Unless, or if they don't, militia will start to form, and militia will start to attack Pakistan again. And maybe it's not a full-on war, but there's definitely like battalions coming at each other from both ends. And to me, that's not peace.
Yeah, it's a delicate, I think it's a complicated matter in the sense, I think, the 2011 World Cup quarter semi-final.
Were you happy?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, of course, I was very happy as an Indian team supporter.
Were
But
you happier to win the World Cup or to beat Pakistan?
yeah, no, it's funny, right? The Indian captain mentioned this, right? That when they got to the semi-final, people said that
This is the final.
we don't care what happens in the final, you have to beat Pakistan. And he said the sad part was, once we won the semi-final, they kept saying that, okay, now you've got to the final, you have to win the final as well. I mean, there's no point otherwise. So
It was a close game. I mean, 30 runs, yeah.
But if you think of it, those were the days of like real bonhomie. I mean, both prime ministers were sitting next to each other watching the match.
Right.
They were, and in fact, if I think so, at that time, Yusuf Raza Gilani was the prime minister.
Yeah.
He and Manmohan Singh come from the same part of the Punjab, so they actually can speak a certain Punjabi dialect, which so apparently their advisors couldn't understand what they were saying.
Really?
And they were, I think, very concerned. Okay, are they striking something which we will have to like defend later on? Because
Right. What are they just
I think
saying? Let's go to war.
they were like having a nice chat with each other.
Wow.
So I think the in that sense, that those were the good days, right? At that point. But yeah, no, I think
Even then, like, I felt like India we gotta beat India. It's a war, basically.
Yeah, no, the rivalry. So there is rivalry, but I think what is important, I think, for both countries, the citizens of both countries to understand is that you might feel wronged by government policies or even non-state actors in a certain group, but is that sufficient reason to dehumanize an entire nation of 1.4 billion people, or a nation of, I guess what Pakistan is about 200 million. 250 million. Is that sufficient cause? And I think that separation is important. To have that, is your fight against select non-state actors in Pakistan? Is your fight against the Pakistan military? I mean, the Pakistan military right now is also not the most, now it's become very popular, but even 2 weeks back, it was not the most popular
it's very
constituent in Pakistan. So, or is your fight against the entire Pakistan nation? Which means a big, which is, and I think I completely agree. I think the history, like the way students, the children are taught history in both countries is problematic. And I remember this was a conversation which I heard when I was in DC back in 2010, right, a year before that World Cup semi-final. I forget who, but there was this Pakistani commentator on human rights who mentioned this. This was the release of Jaswant Singh's book on his sort of autobiography, and he deals with Pakistan as foreign minister of India, where she mentions that I think it's important for Pakistan to come out of its identity as an opposition to India. In many ways, Pakistani national identity is framed as a binary of India. Which is, and I can agree with that. Yeah. You want to come out of that, and I think in some ways, I wanted to think that we have come out of that. This is so. For instance, if you think of even foreign policy post 90s, especially after India's economic growth really took off in the 90s, Indian foreign policy diplomats have worked really hard to stop what or to end what they call is a hyphenation of India and Pakistan. That, okay, treat India not as sort of a part of the India-Pakistan problem. Treat India on its own merits as a major democratic, high economic growth, potential sort of economic superpower country. And not as, like in this part of the world, we have 2 nuclear weapon states and we need to make sure they don't go to war. And in some ways, that's kind of gone right now, especially with the events going on. So that's a concern. But I think there has to be in some ways a humanizing of the people of Pakistan. Even it's probably important to you can't wash away history. So you can't deny that there's been wars, and for instance the Mumbai terrorist attacks. They were traced back to handlers in Pakistan. So it's not that you shouldn't teach this to students, but I think it's also probably important at some stage to not dehumanize an entire nation because of, non-state actors or, non-state actors who probably have some state support somewhere or used to have state support somewhere. So I think that distinction is important to make, because what ends up happening is, sadly, and this is something which is probably really important for India to take into account, most Indians don't meet Pakistanis in their lives. But so their closest approximation to Pakistanis are fellow Indian Muslims. They get, and these are people who chose to stay on in India, despite having a choice to go to Pakistan.
Right.
So they are the ones who are demonized. So the current, what will be India's Secretary of State, the Home Minister, he mentioned 10 years back during the elections in Bihar, he says that today, if the BJP doesn't win in Bihar in these elections, there will be festivities in Pakistan, which is essentially an euphemism that, Muslims will be very happy. So in some ways, like, this antagonism for Pakistan comes out
on the Indian
as
Muslims,
as a distrust of Indian Muslims.
That's very true, yeah.
That population is essentially the population of Pakistan.
More. India has more Muslims than Pakistan.
It's 200 million Muslim population. That's the world's largest religious minorities.
Right.
And if you want to essentially demonize them because you don't like your neighbor, I mean, what sort of a country you're going to end up being?
Yeah. It's sad because I was thinking about this. I think both countries use the antagonism between each other for political gain. Like, for sure, the current military chief used it for his own political power. Modi definitely did it to elevate his status. And the thing is, as long as both countries keep prioritizing short-term political strength, long-term nothing is ever going to get done, because you're prioritizing 2 to 5 year election sequences, and you can't solve a generational issue if you keep prioritizing and thinking in 2-year, 4-year timeframes.
Yeah, that's something which probably might have changed a bit, especially now in the Indian side. I'm not as familiar with the Pakistan sort of how it's how those have happened. But if you think of it, like when Kargil happened, the government by 1999, the government had actually lost its majority in parliament, and elections were scheduled in October that year. And there was a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister, who was essentially a caretaker Prime Minister, Vajpayee, that let's open up the international border to relieve pressure in Kashmir. And he steadfastly refused. He said that come what may, Indian troops or the Indian Air Force will not cross the line of control or the international border. We will do whatever, even if it might be a bit more costly for us. We will not, we'll maintain the sanctity of the international border. He could have chosen, if he wanted, and he would have probably been hailed as some, hero probably, or at least they could have spun it like that if the war went to their favor, that, look, we were not hesitant to take the war into Pakistan to do this. Or same Manmohan Singh, 2008 in August, his government survives a very narrow trust vote on the India-US deal. He loses his left alliance partners in that trust vote. And the terrorist attack happens in November. The US, I believe, said, Barack Obama, the US said that we support India's right to defend itself. Could have sent a couple of planes into Pakistan, chose not to give that up, and he had elections in 2009.
Interesting.
He chose not to give that up, he's been lampooned ever since for that.
Well, was he part of the Congress party?
He was part of the Congress. He just passed away, I guess, earlier this year. I guess he passed away, but he was considered a soft prime minister.
Because he didn't take action.
Because he did not take a muscular action, but I think his calculus was, I will not give up India's economic growth and not allow essentially a bunch of non-state actors to dictate my foreign policy.
Interesting.
Like some non-state actors, maybe with some state support, possibly some state support, comes in and, does a very heinous terrorist attack, but I'm not going to let my foreign policy be dictated
on the basis
by non-state actors.
That's a great point, I guess. In that situation, he didn't care for his short-term political interest.
Yeah, he was like, look, my goal is to get India's growth story going, and a big war. And it's hard. It's hard to precisely. Right now, I think both India and Pakistan feel they can precisely contain the level of escalation. That it will only be contained to this much and no further. And that's hard to do. It's not. It doesn't always go to plan.
Something that I think about too is Pakistan has been one of the biggest victims of terrorism as well. Like, Pakistan has lost 80,000 people since the U.S.'s war on terror. 80,000 people. That's insane. 80,000 civilians. And it's in like the terror attacks that happen in India, as severe and harsh as they are. Pakistan, there were just a terrorist attack, I think, 3 days ago in Pakistan. It's like every week there's a terrorist attack that happens. And it's...
Also happens when you don't have a strong infrastructure.
Not just that, it's just like
it's happened on the army. I mean, army children. It was an army school bombed in Peshawar.
Right.
40 kids got killed.
That's an act of war, basically. You're targeting the army's children, which is the most powerful force in Pakistan.
Who are these terrorist groups attacking Pakistan?
It's a spread
within Pakistan, or
it's a spread of different groups. There's the Pakistani Taliban. There's Lashkar-e, I don't even know. There's a bunch of these militant groups. But we were having this conversation 2 weeks ago, and you brought up an interesting point: is the education system in Pakistan, because it's so bad, people start sending their kids to madrasas. Now, madrasas are basically these extreme religious schools where they give them food, they house them, they basically take care of them way more than a government school would. And so people who can't afford to send their kids to private school, and they know that government schools kind of suck, they send these kids to madrasas. And these madrasas, they basically control kids, they brainwash them, and they're not good people, man. And so you're raising a bunch of young men who are hungry for violence, who are ready to make more of their lives, and you produce people who become terrorists, essentially. Not all of them, because some of these kids are actually,
but they get radical.
You get radicalized because you're in the company of people that preach violence. They're extremists,
Or you might be more sympathetic to, even if you are not doing it yourself, you might have a more sympathetic view to the people who are doing such stuff.
Yeah.
There's actually a fascinating academic paper in economics in, I think, 2022 by this guy called Rinchin Mirza, and I think another co-author on that paper, who shows that in the Pakistan Punjab, in places with Sufi shrines, old Sufi shrines, in those areas, there's tremendous underinvestment in public education.
Yeah.
And the Sufi shrines kind of push public schools to be underinvested because they are a direct threat to their authority.
Interesting.
I mean, that is of course there. I mean, and if you think of this time, India claimed that the first night strikes, that 9 places killed X number of terrorists, and that X is a pretty high number.
Yeah.
Now, the Pakistan, the sort of the journalists, and I think pretty much everybody has said this, is that what was hit were essentially madrasas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, India did target. I mean, so India looks at those as terror
but
camps.
some of them were like kids, like 8 years old, 9 years old,
India sees them as terror camps, but the Dawn journalists whose interview I heard, they said, these are like Najam Sethi. They were like, you have hit madrasas.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there was radicalization going on. Were they housing like active terrorists in like an open environment?
Yeah. Nobody knows.
Yeah, right. Like, Najam Sethi said, like, do you think that you'll have active terror camps in the middle of a city? Probably not.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that's where you hire, sort of train a few and then you handpick a few, but they send them for training somewhere else.
Yeah.
Possibly. But yeah, the madrasas are like, that's, I think, and that's a problem Pakistan has also faced. Like, Pakistan has lost one ex-prime minister.
Right.
I mean, his son is like her husband is the president of Pakistan. Yeah, she died.
Well, people have all sorts of theories on who actually killed Benazir. They say
it's
her
a suicide.
Actually,
it is a terrorist attack.
Right.
It was a suicide bomber for sure. So that's for sure. Musharraf survived at least 2 attacks.
Right.
And one of them was from the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which was also linked to the parliament attack in India.
Interesting.
So in some ways, Pakistan really pushing back on terror groups or whatever they have pushed back is because a lot of these groups suddenly turned out against Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because I think this is...
So why are they so against? Why are these terrorist groups so against
Because
Pakistan?
these terrorist groups think both India and Pakistan are un-Islamic countries.
Or un-Islamic?
Yeah, both of them are un-Islamic. Both of them are ungodly countries. So they need to... So in some ways...
They're trying to kill them all.
It's like, though these are just as bad as each other.
Why not start their own state, like unofficial state?
Which is, in some ways, at least one part will think that, right?
Yeah, one part.
The problem also is a lot of terrorist organizations in Pakistan, they actually helped the U.S. military when they were fighting America's war on terror. They would help with intelligence services, and then they say Pakistan turned their backs on them. So now they're out for revenge. So it's a lot of it has to do with...
They were probably more allied in the 80s when they were fighting the
Soviets. Yeah.
And they were that's, I think, very well documented that the US put a lot of money into the Mujahideen. The US and the Saudi put a lot of money into that. And
you know what happened in the 80s, right? So America basically funded people in Pakistan, the Mujahideen, and Afghanistan to fight the Soviets.
Yeah.
There was a proxy war in Afghanistan.
They weaponized them too, right?
Yeah, they gave him weaponry. That's how Osama bin Laden was trained, and he actually worked for CIA at some point. But, they trained a bunch of Mujahideen, and then when the US left, they were like, so what do we do now?
Right.
We're basically like these professional military people. Do we just watch our land getting conquered time and time again? And then U.S. invaded Afghanistan, and then that's when the Taliban turned against. They're like, you can't just invade our country. Nobody else has for centuries. It's the land that can never be invaded, Afghanistan. It's called the land of, I forget what it's called, the grave of empires.
Really?
That's what Afghanistan is called. Because no one's ever been able to conquer Afghanistan. No one ever. Look, the U.S. lost the war. The Taliban are back in power. It was basically wasted trillions of dollars for 20 years. But, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to that terror aspect in Pakistan. Yeah. But I don't think...
Why did they not see Pakistan as an Islamic state? What's the reason?
I think I don't think it's that much to do with Islamic. Certainly, there's elements of radical extremism, but I think it's more of just power and control and money. Because you have to think about it. The currency of money in Pakistan for these terror groups is arms and ammunition. So they get basically funded through who's giving them the weapons, who's supplying them the weapons, and they basically use young kids as currency as well. Like, I have these amount of young men pledging allegiance through the madrasa system to me. And it's basically like, it's kind of mafias. It's basically a mafia. It's a sub operation of mafias that are in Pakistan. And political parties actually in Pakistan use these mafias to their own advantage sometimes.
That's
mafia control.
I think it's linked to the fact that I think a lot of the terrorist groups were extremely upset that Pakistan wholeheartedly was part of the war on terror.
They supported America.
They were. Yeah. I mean, I think there was in I remember this. I took a political science class international relations class way back in 2005 as an undergrad, and I think one of the countries with the highest negative perceptions about the US was in Pakistan. Like a major ally of the war of terror, because they saw that the drone attacks, say in the Fata area of Pakistan, they essentially saw this as essentially American sort of bombing innocent civilians. That was the perception.
Because what was happening is America thought that Pakistan was harboring terrorists, so they would attack these madrasas or at times like these local areas where they thought these terrorists were living, and what ended up happening is, most of the time, they would kill innocent children and women. Like, that's what the perception was. And that's why people in Pakistan, like when I was living there, we hated Obama's administration because this was on him. This was on him. Yeah. Like he continued Bush's operations, even though he said he wanted peace. Like he literally, the whole war on terror under Obama was conducted through drone strikes.
Yeah, the drone strikes.
The drone strikes was the main operation.
Obama's thing. So I think that's why I think
unfair war.
Yeah, a lot of groups were very aggrieved that Pakistan agreed to that, and I think Pakistan every time would, I think, make statements condemning the drone strike and saying that it's a breach of sovereignty, all of that, but
America didn't care.
They probably maybe they even, I think, knew about what's happening and they just chose not to respond to that. And I think again
so if there was a war between India and Pakistan, who are the terrorists siding with? But who are the terrorists attacking?
The terrorists, obviously, it depends, right?
I think if there's a war with India and Pakistan, the terrorists will just sit out that war.
What are you gonna do with? You can't compete with national armies.
I don't think. You can probably. I think.
But do you think Pakistan will try to weaponize these groups?
Not in a. I don't think in a full-fledged war. No, because they'll just not stand a chance at that point. These are. Actually, again, terrorists are terrorists because they target non-combatants.
Wait, that would be great for Pakistan, though, right? Because these groups will be taken out completely, and they won't pose a threat to Pakistan anymore.
So I think here is the Indian critique of the argument, and this is, I think, what if you think of, like I say, an Indian diplomat, biggest frustration is, and many of them written about this. They have said that the problem with Pakistan is Pakistan makes a distinction between terrorists. There are some bad terrorists who operate against Pakistan, but the good ones are the ones who listen to them and operate against India. Yeah. And they are very happy to keep the good ones, but take out the bad ones.
Contradictory, yeah.
So I think, for instance, like, there's this one person who is very wanted in India. So there was a time in 2000, in the 2000s, for instance, when, in the BJP's first time they were in power, they said that India-Pakistan relations can be smoothened very easily if Pakistan returns one person back to India, a person called Dawood Ibrahim, who conducted these big terror strikes in Bombay in 1993, who is apparently living in Pakistan, in Karachi.
Is he still living there? Or?
That's the Indian claim that, Dawood is still... Now that list has gone up. But yeah, I think he's, I think... So apparently he's the person who Pakistan has sort of nurtured to do the terror, but he has never acted against Pakistan. So he's the quote-unquote good terrorist who only works against India and doesn't work against Pakistan. But then there are some not so good ones who sometimes work against Pakistan and even tries to assassinate their political leaders.
I think, this is why, like, I really liked when Imran Khan was in power. One of his promises, and I don't think he succeeded, was basically getting rid of the mafias in Pakistan, getting rid of corruption, not letting the military have all the say, and really having a true democracy where people had the most amount of power. Obviously, the military, the moment he started speaking against the military, they took him out. Yeah. He's in jail, rotting in jail. The greatest thing Pakistan has, one of the greatest leaders Pakistan's ever produced, is sitting in a jail cell. But I think you can't, honestly, like, the India-Pakistan thing also goes back to the individual countries, because there's so much corruption in Pakistan. Like, among the current party right now, Noon League, is literally a nepotistic, it's a family of the most corrupt people. They are billionaires that have never, they have no meritocracy when it comes to them. The only thing they have is political power that they have been seasoning for the last 50 years.
Do they call themselves democracy still?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's not a democracy. You can clearly see the military basically controls Pakistan to this day. I think the military now has more of a control over Pakistan than it ever in the last 15 years, for sure.
So it's almost like the royal family if Pakistan was.
I mean,
Well,
nobody
right now,
likes
the two royal families have come together.
Yeah,
Essentially, it's a coalition of
the People's Party of Pakistan,
Benazir of the Bhutto and the Sharif families. Yeah, no, I mean,
those are the two main parties in Pakistan: Noon League, Sharif family, and then People's Party.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been surprising. This is something very surprising for an Indian observer about Pakistan politics, and I don't claim to know much, but in India, this is something. We have had leaders, who have been. It's not that India has excellent political leaders always, but come what may, whoever loses in India stays on in India. You would not find an Indian political leader after they've lost elections to run off to somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's, Musharraf, I don't think died in Pakistan.
He died in Dubai.
He had to leave the country.
Yeah.
Whenever, when when Benazir lost, she didn't live in Pakistan. She left.
In the UK, yeah.
She left to the UK. Nawaz Sharif went off as well to the UK.
Yeah.
So it seems that the political system they probably are leaving. Right now, if you even think of Bangladesh, the ex-prime minister is sitting in India. She can't live in her own country. I don't think that's almost ever happened in India. Regardless of how unpopular the political leader has been, and how badly they have fared in elections, and even if it has meant that they've spent a few days in jail, they have hung around. I think Imran Khan is the only leader who has refused to leave Pakistan.
And he's in jail.
Yeah, he's in jail. But at least...
Is that the reason they leave? Because they'll end up...
Well, a lot of them have money in foreign places. So they're like, if this guy takes power, he'll start an anti-corruption investigation into my money, and I won't be able to access any of this money because in Pakistan. So they have all these offshore accounts. They can only access them. And Imran Khan's the only one because he doesn't have any money.
So maybe India should take Pakistan back, right? In this logic,
I don't think any.
That's not gonna work out. But,
you don't want. I think
something about Pakistan. No prime minister has ever completed a 5-year term.
Yeah.
No, in the 78 years now of existence, no prime minister in Pakistan has ever completed a 5-year term.
And you guys don't think, maybe that's a problem?
It's not.
Maybe we're actually not that great.
Well, no, it's not.
It's crazy.
It's not that issue. The issue is the country is so impoverished. The richest of the richest control everything. They have no empathy for the poor. Most of the country is illiterate. What happens when you have a bunch of illiterate people? You can control them easily.
Yeah.
So the reason why Noon League and People's Party keeps winning elections is they literally control these poor people. They brainwash them and they say, do you want to, sell your, because a lot of them are farmers. Do you want to sell your agricultural product in this area? Okay, vote for my party. It's literally like a gun to your head vote. And what happens then? You can't have a healthy democracy. And it's, like you said, it's a very complicated issue. I think it all starts with those grassroots efforts. You got to get the education system to be better. You got to have a basic recognition of human rights. You got to have a democracy, at least a solid, I'm not saying like a solid democracy, because Pakistan's never been a democracy. Like, it's very rare. I don't recall a time when it was truly a democracy.
Yeah, the army has, of course, a lot of, I think, say on
they control all elections,
how domestic politics happen. Yeah. Which in a way, that is again one thing India has very successfully been able to do. The military leadership is very firmly under control of the civilian leadership.
Really? So the military is not that powerful in India comparatively to
the
Pakistan.
Military has, and I think that has been the case for ever since independence. The military has been firmly under the control of the civilian leadership.
Why is that? Why? I don't understand. Like, why?
That's a great question. If you think of it, right? Like, people like Ayub Khan, not in the same country, they grew up in the same military tradition.
Right.
Yahya Khan, who was the 71, the general in charge of the country, and the general,
the 70s.
He and Sam Manekshaw, who was the opposing general in India, they went to the same military academy, run by the British. They were trained by the British, but for whatever reasons, and there's a book on this, and I think I've not read it, but a book by Steve Wilkinson called, I think, Army and the Nation, where he contrasts this and why these have led to different cultures. But the Indian military has never, even when there has been political instability in terms of governments not lasting their term, they have never interfered in the running of the country. They've never tried to sort of nudge the civilian leadership and say, like, what's going on.
Maybe I could track that to the early history of Pakistan, because Ayub Khan, was the first military dictator, and he took power very early, maybe like
56.
3-4 years.
Yeah, 56.
And
So within 9 years.
Was the first decade, and I don't think that happened in India.
No,
ever.
and it's not that it did not happen. It's never.
Has there ever been
even,
martial law in India? No.
No,
Right?
there was suspension of civil liberties, but that was done by a civilian government.
Okay.
It was never the army chief ever coming and talking about domestic policy. That just doesn't have. There is a very clear separation of military and civil powers in India, and the army chief has the army chief retains autonomy in operations. Like in 71, the civilian leadership was very eager that India start a war with Pakistan within April 71. The army chief said, no, you need to give me time to prepare. I'm not prepared, and I'll start a war only when I'm prepared, and I'll start a war in November. So the civilian leadership deferred to that military opinion. But yeah, the political decisions are honored by the military leadership.
That something we haven't talked about is Kashmir, though, and all the recent events have stemmed from this disputed territory. What's your take on this area of land? Why the two countries keep going back and forth about this land?
Yeah, and I think
and describe to somebody not listening, what is Kashmir?
So yeah, I think so. Again, this is this part of, I think I'm going to quote international agency. I think which I think what's been referred recently is that it's a territory at the border of India and Pakistan, northernmost point of India, which is claimed by both India and Pakistan, but neither control its full part of Kashmir. So, and I think here maybe you can tell me a bit more about how the history in Pakistan for the school level works. But say in the Indian school system, the Kashmir dispute is there's no dispute technically, because the way it is done is that, look, you had this was not even directly controlled by the British government. It was an independent state of Kashmir by an independent ruler. So when India and Pakistan get independence, there were all these princely states who had the option of acceding to either of the new nations, and they were expected to accede according to the wishes of their people. Now, all these states were autocratic, so no one really knew what the wishes were exactly there. But the assumption was that, okay, if you're Hindu, you'll go to India. If you're Muslim, you'll go to Pakistan. And Kashmir is this one state who was abhorred to going into either of the two dominions and said they will stay independent.
At that time, was Kashmir a Hindu majority region?
It was a Muslim majority state with a Hindu ruler.
Hari Singh, right?
Hari Singh is the ruler. So this is basically what the Dogra rulers are there. And I think his dream was Kashmir will be like Switzerland of South Asia. It will be this
like
neutral.
Interesting. But I thought he wanted to go with India. I thought that
he didn't want to go with India. He was pushed that, and Lord Mountbatten
pushed by the British to choose with India.
They said that you choose someone. They said, look, you choose who you want, and I think the way it is, the way your geography is, it might even make sense for you to join India. He was steadfast and adamant. He said, I'll be neutral. And so he signed what is called standstill agreements, saying that, I'm going to be neutral. But then in 47, in October, Pakistan-backed militias enter Kashmir to take, and they enter Kashmir, the valley. And then he approaches India and says, can you protect the Kashmir Valley from foreign aggression, essentially external aggression? So India says, we'll do it only if you accede to India. And so to the Indian audience, there is no dispute. The Hari Singh, the ruler of Kashmir, signed a treaty, signed an instrument of accession saying that, my princely of Kashmir goes and exceeds to India.
But at that time, did Hari Singh have control over all of Kashmir? So the modern day Pakistan and India.
Not only that, so Pakistan has essentially so India claims something called POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. If you look at the map of Kashmir, what India claims as Pakistan, so like recently Prime Minister Modi said that we'll talk to Pakistan on two issues. One is terrorism, the other is returning POK to India. That's it. There's nothing more for us to talk about.
That's never going to happen. Yeah.
But if you think of the POK, what India shows as POK as in the maps, that includes what is called Azad Kashmir.
Which is,
But it also includes what Pakistan counts as Gilgit-Baltistan.
Oh my God.
which Pakistan
That's
claims as
territory.
So, but that was essentially part of Hari Singh's
Original. Interesting.
empire, which was and there's a part of Kashmir which again is also part of Hari Singh, which is with China right now, which is what is the Aksai Chin part.
By the way, Gilgit
ceded
Baltistan is the most beautiful,
very
part
beautiful,
of
yeah,
Pakistan. It's where K2 is, or close to Swat. Yeah.
So this is a very India views this essentially as illegal occupation, and that's just how. So like there's essentially no dispute now. What the problem the problem which is there is, of course, that there has been a lot of, in a very simplistic language, movements for greater autonomy, because the successive Indian governments since independence have been skeptical of how much Kashmiri governments and local Kashmiri politicians can be trusted in terms of, how quote unquote patriotic they are. So India has always tried to, the New Delhi government has always tried to fiddle with the political process in Kashmir. So if you look at the Kashmiri chief ministers, they've been arbitrarily changed between 50 and 1990s. Till the 90s, it blows up into essentially a secessionist movement out of India.
So after 47, Hari Singh makes this plea, right? So then that part goes to India.
He abdicates. Indian army moves in.
So then, how did Pakistan get control? Because of the militias?
Because India could not push the entire Pakistani raiders out. So however much they could put on. So basically, what is right now called the line of control used to be the ceasefire line, and that's when India moves a UN resolution. India moves a UN resolution calling for international arbitration, and which, for instance, the Indian right wing thinks that was like a big sellout of the Indian government then, that, why do you even, this is the done deal, right? Like, I mean, Kashmir comes to us, if Pakistan doesn't give it up, knock them out.
Right.
Why go to the UN? But so the UN has a Security Council, one of the earliest Security Council resolutions is there on the issue. But then, whatever the part India control / the part which is under, which is within the jurisdiction of India, that essentially is quote unquote integrated into the Indian Union, slowly but surely.
But they always had semi-autonomy, correct?
So it depends on how you want to define autonomy, right? So for instance, India is
like their own local elections.
Yeah, so India has a federal structure of government like the US. So that autonomy, the autonomy which extends to every single state in India, extends to Kashmir as well.
Right. Yeah.
You have local now. Here is, I think,
but not until recently, like 2019.
It's always been. I mean, Kashmir has had elections all throughout. I think the question is, how fair have those elections been? So, for instance, I think that in some ways the start of the quote-unquote militancy in Kashmir is traced back to the 1987 elections, which is more or less accepted to be completely rigged, so that New Delhi can have a government which will essentially listen to what New Delhi says. Which in fact the person who ends up, I think, coming to power is the father of the fellow who right now is the Chief Minister of Kashmir in India, Farooq Abdullah. That was seen as essentially a rigged election, and many people who contested that election and felt that they were essentially rigged and not given a share of power joined into the militancy. And so that creates this really nasty phase of spiraling violence in Kashmir.
So people in Kashmir view it as an abjuration of their rights, like the fact that it was a rigged election.
And
that's where these militant groups in Kashmir rise.
A lot of them comes up. A lot of them says that we just
these freedom fighters. That's where
we don't. So that the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, the JKLF, they are like, no, we don't accept this. And now then there's, of course, there's complications after that. This is the 90s, so Pakistan is also, they take the opportunity to sort of influence them. They get training in Pakistan, but then there's also this security clampdown on Kashmir in the 90s, which, there are recorded human rights violations, which happens, extreme human rights violations, which happens. But I think, so I guess if you ask me, personally, I think I would I think the very sane voices, and I think that's probably the way to move forward, is One was made by this Indian Prime Minister in 1995, P.V. Narasimha Rao. He stated that as long as it is within the ambits of the Indian Constitution, for Kashmir, autonomy, sky is the limit. So basically, his message was that, look, don't ask for secession. Don't ask for, because independence and secession, no Indian state has the right to secede from the Indian Union. Don't ask for that. As long as you don't ask for secession, we will consider any autonomy you want. We will, we will consider any autonomy you want. You want to frame your own laws? Yeah, sure, we will let you do that. Again, as long as those laws don't violate the Indian Constitution, that's fine. And then Atal Bihari Vajpayee in that 2003 reach out to Pakistan, he mentioned that Kashmir policy will be on 3 principles. He said, and the 3 principles he said were Insaniyat, humanity, Jamhuriyat, with democracy, and Kashmiriyat, paying special tribute to the Kashmiri political culture. So I think that's in some ways the pathway to move forward. And that, I don't think that we can.
So then what I'm confused about is, that makes sense, but why did Modi revoke that special status that Kashmir had in 2019? So what article was it?
Article 370 plus Article 35A. So those are the special privileges which Kashmir accede under to the Indian Union. Right. Now, Mr. Modi's party was founded in opposition to those principles.
In opposition to Article 370.
Article 370, or the special privileges extended to Jammu and Kashmir. They were very much against that.
And when
from
was
1950.
This approved?
1950. So his party gets
3 years
then.
after the Hari Singh incident.
Yeah. So because this is what essentially, so many see this Article 370 as essentially the bond which ties Kashmir to India. And the Mr. Modi's party's thing was, why does a state which is a part of India, which has acceded to India, why does it need special status? Why do you, and their logic is this, for instance, Kashmir was not the only state to do this. Hyderabad did that. Hyderabad was a state, and it was in some ways the reverse of Kashmir. It's a state within mainland India, right? Surrounded by India on every side. But the king or the Nizam of Hyderabad, he's a Muslim ruler. His subjects are Hindu. He says, I'll be independent. And, when he does, at the end of the day, when Hyderabad does accede to India, there is no special status for Hyderabad. There is no rule that, say, an Indian who lives in Calcutta can't go and buy land in Hyderabad. So Mr. Modi's parties in that, the leaders then said that, okay, why, if this is not the rule for Hyderabad, why do we have this special rule for Kashmir?
Interesting. So their calculus is if Kashmir is truly part of India, why can't it truly integrate completely?
Exactly. And their critique is that because you have given this special status, this has essentially led to Kashmiris not. They also don't feel that they're part of India because there is this special set of laws for them. So, if you want full integration of Kashmir,
you have to get rid of this.
We need to get rid of this.
Because it's creating a binary
because
line,
it's creating a divide between India and Kashmir. So,
but the way it was conducted, a lot of Kashmiris, like there was blackouts, human rights violations.
There was complete clampdown.
Yeah.
There was complete clampdown.
No access to internet.
All mainstream politicians of Kashmir were under house arrest.
Right.
The current chief minister, who is currently in power, he was under house arrest. And if I hope I'm not misquoting this, but for instance, the reason for his detention was given that this person has tremendous political appeal. His political appeal is so much that even during times when militants called for boycotts of elections, he could get people to come out and vote.
Wow.
So he's a very popular guy. Put him in.
What's his name?
His name is Omar Abdullah. So very, very charismatic, politician, but Kashmiri politician. And, he's from this Kashmiri quote-unquote royal family. So his grandfather is the politician who pushes for the accession of Kashmir to India in 47, for Sheikh Abdullah, who also was prime minister.
So what happened to Hari Singh? He just died naturally?
He abdicated. That was kind of the term. Because he was very unpopular. He was grossly unpopular.
Interesting.
There were protests against Hari Singh's rule even before this accession happened.
Was the one that wanted to keep neutral, right?
He wanted to keep neutral. Okay. So his grandson is still alive. Son. Karan Singh, I think he's still alive. And, he dabbled in the politics and, he was, quote unquote, the governor of Kashmir for some time. And, he's been part of the governments.
If Hari Singh was decisive and was like, no, we're going with India, or we're going with Pakistan, would the tensions be this crazy right now in an alternate world?
He became decisive, just became very decisive very late in the process.
Because he was unpopular, I think it was still persistent.
He was unpopular. Right? So I think so. Again, I think, and this is where I think why. So India says that there is no dispute. I mean, if there's any dispute with Kashmir, it's something which India will have to figure out on its own, and there's no reason for anyone in the world, forget Pakistan, to even have a comment on it. Pakistan draws it back that no, look, there's a UN Security Council resolution which is pending. And that resolution
from the 50s,
from the 48, I guess,
1940. After that, okay,
yeah. So hey, how are you, saying it is not a dispute?
So under international law, then Kashmir is a disputed territory.
Under the UN Security Council resolution,
it's
that
still
is
pending. Yeah,
that is still pending.
Right. So there is no recognition officially.
I don't know about. I mean, I can't speak of international law, but think of what you read in the newspapers internationally.
Mm-hmm.
The term used is Indian administered Kashmir.
And then Pakistan administered.
We may not like it. Indians might not like it. I mean, we abhor it. For instance,
so it's disputed. Yeah.
If you go and open up a map of Kashmir today from here, the map you will see sitting in the US is very different from the map if you open up Google Maps from India. Because India told Google that if you don't show the full map of India, we will shut down Google in India.
India said that to Google, right?
Yeah, India said, I mean, if you want to operate in India, put the whole map of Kashmir as we say it on our maps.
In India, if you look up Kashmir, even the Pakistani side of Kashmir.
Yeah, Gilgit-Baltistan, everything is there.
Gilgit-Baltistan included.
Is there.
Oh my God.
I mean, that is the government position. That is the official position of the government.
Wow.
I mean, that is territory which India thinks is part of Indian territory.
And Pakistan thinks the same. They think that the Indian administered Kashmir is theirs.
I don't think Pakistan does Pakistan care about Jammu. I think they only care about the valley.
The Kashmir, yeah.
Yeah, they only care about the valley. They don't care about the Jammu part. India claims the entire state for itself.
The entire state.
Right? Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, regardless of what the Indian government.
I think Pakistan does care about Jammu.
The whole thing?
I think so.
I don't know.
So what if Singh had wanted to go with Pakistan? And he was decisive from the beginning. Hey,
Jinnah would have loved it. Yeah.
What would, in alternate reality, though, what would have happened?
I don't think India could have done much with that.
So everything
had they acceded,
there would be no tensions right now, though, with this territory.
That's a counterfactual. But at least I mean, they're
hypothetically.
Technically, if Hari Singh would have said, I want to go to Kashmir. I mean, if you think of the quote unquote logic of partition, I mean, it was that
a Muslim majority
Muslim areas which have contiguous areas with large Muslim population in the north, west and the eastern parts of India should be essentially sovereign separate units. So it's consistent with that. But the matter is, it did not. Sadly, he did not go.
No, I'm aware. I'm just.
Yeah, it's hard to test the counterfactual.
A lot of this, I mean, this is what I'm hearing. A lot of commotion and tension is because of one guy saying he wants neutrality. Pretty much.
Yeah, he made a.
Which
had he been decisive on either side, probably would have saved some trouble for many of.
So this guy
many
is
people.
Like a Franz Ferdinand type guy,
I guess
invoking something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the Kashmir, but I think so. Again, there is no.
Hari Singh is to blame, probably.
He is
partly.
There's technically no, in the Indian eyes, there's no dispute, but there's a lot of cleanup to be done in terms of addressing a lot of grievances of Kashmiris on the ground. That we are this piece of territory everybody wants. No one cares about us. No one cares about. No one cares about. Right now, I mean, they got shelled. I mean, nowhere else. I think fatalities in the Indian side happened. Civilian fatalities happened in Kashmir. It didn't happen in Punjab. Right. It didn't happen in Rajasthan. It happened in Kashmir.
The Kashmiris have been taken.
We get shelled by Pakistan. We have unprecedented lockdowns because our state one fine morning is cut up and diminished. It's like today, for instance, what if today, Washington suddenly decides that, California will be cut up into 3 states. Will California accept that?
Right.
I don't think they would.
Yeah.
But, that happened to Kashmir and, it was not done by some, it's not that the BJP won election and they had a mandate. It was an executive order of parliament which did it. It was not, and it was done essentially under police, essentially with police support. So they're like, so we are, sure, you want us to be part of India, but we are getting shelled. We are, we have internet lockouts and clampdowns. What's
human
going on?
rights violations?
Yeah, but like what's going on? So I think that's, whether...
Because the problem is also the way the Indian government treats Kashmiris is not.
So I think that's so. Yeah,
Because after this terrorist attack happened, they literally arrested like 1,500 Kashmiris. They put them in jail, and they had no idea. They didn't have reasonable suspicion to arrest these people, and so that creates animosity amongst the Kashmiris.
There's multiple costs which Kashmir paid because of the attack. The first thing which happened was the attack happened end April,
third week of April.
That's the beginning of the tourist season.
Right.
There was a mass of cancellations of flights, of travel plans to Kashmir, because of mass panic. So this Pahalgam, where the attack happened, no one is going there. So if you think of, say the local guides, they're essentially daily wage workers who don't have a living right now because the tourists just not.
Tourism is majority of the business,
tourism is not going to show up. So in every sense,
this was
the citizens of Kashmir have been really hit by this whole thing. And if you look at it from a more personal level, this is happening for this extreme violence is happening for 35 years.
Right.
So it's intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
It's very tragic. That is very tragic.
100%.
It's
that's my biggest fear. So that when India, like, I understand Modi wants national unity, and he's like, okay, if Kashmir is part of India, why should they have this special status? So understand the perspective, but you can't fully integrate into a country where you view the military as an occupying force. Like a lot of Kashmiris, and Imran Khan used to say this when he was in power, that he said that Kashmiris feel that they are being occupied, that their land is essentially being invaded, and now that anybody can settle in, Imran Khan's biggest fear was the BJP was orchestrating this that changed the demographics of the area to make it not a Muslim majority state and have the demographics basically change essentially. What do you say to that concern? Because I think it's a valid concern.
So no, it is definitely one of the most militarized regions in the world. If you look at the amount of military per capita, it's a lot. So that is definitely, something. And again, at the end of the day, having the military there is not costless for India. There are costs to keeping so many military people, and it's not. So they have a good Kashmiri friend who I think who says like, it's really bad for us, but think of the military as well. It's not good for them. I don't think they're also happy to be in a place where essentially they are not sure if the person they are standing next to might suddenly fish out a gun and shoot at them. Because, the terrorist attacks have also not, they have not spared the military as well. So it is, it's an hostile situation for everybody. So it's, there's antagonism at that point. It's not easy for anyone over there. That is indeed, that is to preserve the demography was the reason for the special, or was one of the things for the special status, and that was something which was opposed by the BJP. What's happened though, however, has been that has not turned out, it's been 6 years since that's been removed.
The demographics have not changed.
That has not changed. There has been some...
Well, because of the tumultuous political situation, right?
Possibly. So, what happens
people are
if,
scared
let's say...
to go to Kashmir.
What happens if it does come down? We don't know.
I think it will probably,
But that has not changed. There's been a lot more in Jammu. In the Jammu part, because again, the special status applied to the entire state.
And is Jammu more Hindu majority?
Jammu is Hindu, that area is more Hindu majority. So in that area, there's been people coming and all of that, but it's not been as much in the valley. So the valley demographics, I think, has been till now been unaltered relatively.
Because of the tumultuous political situation, I assume.
Possibly. So again, we don't know what would happen, but. I think the crux of the matter is the political climate of Kashmir certainly needs to be improved.
So, okay, if India is such a democratic state, right, why doesn't the UN say, hey, India, if you're such a democratic state, obviously the rest of the world is unclear whose property, I mean, whose land this is. Why don't you leave it up to the people of Kashmir? And if Kashmir's people say, hey, India, and we're with India, then let it be.
So the UN Security Council resolution, that is the kind of the last point on the resolution, but the problematic
free and fair election,
the plebiscite. So to figure out what are the wish of the people. The problem though of that resolution is there are 3 points prior to that. Point number 1 is Pakistan will remove all its forces from Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
Point number 2 is India will remove forces but will keep a bare minimum for peace operations. Point number 3 is the UN group will be satisfied with what arrangements are there, and then we'll play. The point number 1.
United Nations?
Yeah, India wrote this.
The point number 1 has never got satisfied. So essentially, whenever the plebiscite term comes up, the India response is is none of your business because it's part of India. It's internal matter. So that goes against essentially the basic premise of the UN that, you shall not interfere in any other country's internal matters. So it's part of India, so get out of it. And even if you really want to interfere, fulfill the first condition.
But how
get Pakistan to vacate?
But the problem is Pakistan would never do it because they would view it as unfair because India gets to keep forces. And Pakistan
why not
both countries remove the forces and there's a plebiscite.
Just resolve that, leave the forces there equally, and then just do the vote.
But it won't be free and fair because both countries will try to rig
So I
the
think
elections.
if you want to really be realistic about, if you want a personal realistic thing, I think so in 71 after the Bangladesh episode, what was the Shimla Treaty between India and Pakistan, which Pakistan has suspended now after this thing. The Shimla Agreement says that and it specifically says that any dispute between the two countries, including Kashmir, shall only be resolved bilaterally.
Bilaterally.
So India said
mediation.
Between India and Pakistan only, no third party.
External.
No third party, no UN, no US, no Donald Trump, nobody. So it really so Indian.
So it can never be resolved then if you're not talking to each other.
So Indian politicians, Indian bureaucrats have not been thrilled about Donald Trump tweeting every other day and saying that, you know what, get me involved, I'll solve this. Because they're like, look, we have decided that
we don't want you involved.
No one, forget Donald Trump, we don't want anybody. If we have to do a talk to anyone, we talk with Pakistan, no one else.
Wait, so because Pakistan eliminated this treaty,
now, so they have suspended this. They said, because, you eliminated the Indus Treaty, okay, we will not.
Indus Treaty was the water.
The water one, and we will not talk. So we'll hold this also in abeyance till, we have better relations. But so if you think of a bilateral thing, and I think this is where, of course, I don't think any of the countries would accept it, but the back channel. So I think the most progress was made between 1999 and 2005-06, before Musharraf got unseated by the lawyers' protest in Pakistan. And I think they were kind of close to getting a sort of a deal where it would be said that, look, this is a stalemate. None of us are going to ever be able to satisfy the UN resolution. That's just not practical. We can't. And the political costs are massive for this. Let's finalize the line of control as the international border. That, okay, we keep what we have, you keep what we have. And, then whatever else we have to do, we'll do it domestically. But yeah, let's solve the international dispute. And I think in some ways that will probably be the...
But there's no dispute in India.
There's no technical dispute. So I think there is. That's really the most realistic way to go about,
so
because I think
India,
it's
pretty much.
It's I think in fees. I think so. For example, like a lot of right wing folks in India thought that this is the event where we will take back Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and they were, I think, disappointed that didn't happen. That's probably not going to happen.
There's only
unless
a military
there is
solution to taking.
Yeah, so that's almost impossible with a nuclear weapon state. Let's face it.
But why would they want the Pakistani administered Kashmir? Because they're fine. They're not they're fine with living with Pakistan. They're not gonna like India.
I think this is where it's more it's a question of emotion than I think reason.
Right.
But it's an emotion. Again, right?
Because Pakistani administered Kashmir has semi-autonomy.
No, it's the thing is it's there on both sides. If you for instance, the general, I think, why I think India, I think, even traces this back to Pakistan, the Pahalgam, is just before the Pahalgam incident happens, Asim Munir suddenly says that Kashmir is the jugular vein of Pakistan. I mean, like, that comes up like people are like, wait, what's going on? Why?
These Pakistani politicians, they say
why? I mean, and he's not even a politician; he's an army general. I mean, why you suddenly get involved in this whole thing? So I think, but the realistic part is, it's that it'll be hard to redraw borders, especially by force. So fix things within your borders, maybe. Why don't I mean, there is I think I don't think anybody, I mean, even Narendra Modi, when he meets Kashmiri politicians after Article 370, he makes this, he says this thing that we will have to reduce two things. He says Dilli ki duri or Dil ki duri. So I think which
translates to?
which so it's like with the distance between our hearts and the distance to Delhi, both will have to be reduced,
right? And
essentially get Kashmir back into the mainstream. So even
he recognizes that you have to win over the people. I think
everybody recognizes that there are grievances amongst Kashmiris about the Indian state.
I just don't understand why the situation persists.
So that will have to be solved. That will have to be, and I think those are a lot easier to solve than thinking of, that, okay, look, yes, we can claim Gilgit-Baltistan for all we like, but I don't know, maybe we also want to accept the reality that that's hard to take back. And let's make sure that, the parts which we have, which have acceded to India and which we have, essentially, quote unquote, bonded with, like completely glued together with India, we make sure that people have less grievances there.
Before we conclude, I just want to ask you about Modi's administration. It seems to me that he seems to be very passive aggressive. Like, on one hand, he wants peace, but on the other, he makes these statements.
Peace on his own terms.
On his own terms. His own,
and from a position of power,
and his own domestic control is not really democratic. Like, you can't say, most people in India can't really say what they want to say about the country. It's a very jingoistic state that he's promoting, so it's not really democratic. And then he does make these statements like these Kashmiris that we want to win your hearts, but it's the army or the soldiers on the ground are doing something else. And Kashmiris definitely feel like the India has not done enough for them. That they definitely have been the victims, and I would agree in a certain sense. So, what is the path forward for this Modi administration in terms of how it wants to conduct itself and portray to the international community?
No, I think, even keeping aside the international community, I think what was a possible setback for Mr. Modi was what was the reasons given by the government for abrogation of Article 370? The reasons was that this is an article which promoted, or this was a constitutional clause which promoted separatism. It promoted separatism, promoted secessionism, it promoted terrorism. And we are doing away with this to improve the security situation of the state. The fact that, terrorists are coming and shooting and killing innocent civilians in a way contradicts that logic. So the administration will definitely have to, just for its domestic audience, will definitely have to deal with the Kashmir issue. I think what you hope is that they don't deal with it purely as a security issue. And they deal with it that, there are very legitimate grievances of people feeling alienated, which need to be addressed. And which, yes, there is a security aspect to it. I mean, you want, whoever has done this massacre needs to be apprehended, and that, they're not going to, you're not going to, a call to surrender is not going to get them to apprehend it. They will have to be dealt with in a military manner. But you also need the civilian government to reach out from the New Delhi and the civilian government in Kashmir to not have the people feel alienated. It's not that we didn't make progress on that. Just today morning I was seeing like voter turnouts in Kashmir, which is, so the way India showed to the world that things are fine in Kashmir is holding elections and saying, oh, people are participating. And if you look at 1990s, the turnout was like 20%. But that increased 20%. No one showed up because and even I mean there's probably reports saying that the people who are showing up probably are showing up because you're being coerced by the armed forces. But gradually that increased. I mean, if you look at turnout in 2008, in 2015, those were considered to be free and fair elections, which was not bugged by the Indian security force or the Indian government. The turnout went up. So there was progress. And I think there is, it's not that India has never walked that path. It has to, in some ways, rediscover that path that, and start to rebuild the relationship, the alienation which people have felt. And I think that's important for India. Forget international, forget Pakistan. That's important. If there is a part of the country which you so vigorously believe should be an integral part of your country, I mean, you don't want the people to be alienated there.
Yeah,
I think that's important for, I think, just as as an Indian citizen, I feel that's important that I don't want people in my country who have the same passport as me feel that they don't belong
they're different,
here,
right?
Or they're treated differently,
right? What would be your final message to both countries? If you could talk to both prime ministers today, you could talk to the entire political establishment of both countries, what would you say to them?
We need to I hope it's happening, but continuing with what's going on as part of so what the way these things, whenever there's a flare up, the way it's sort of calm down is they start with what is called confidence building measures. So one confidence building measures. The CBMs as they call it. So one of them which I think so that the continue the regular talks of the Director General of Military Operations, that the DGMOs have been talking. So one thing they agreed was we'll pull back troops from the border. So de-escalate, essentially set the escalation ladder back to zero. So that, next time, you really, let's say, you are compelled to take military action. It shouldn't be that, the last time we sent missiles, so we have to do something more than missiles. It shouldn't be starting from that. Even if you have to restart military action, it should be something from a much lower level. That, okay, maybe if we think that there are non-state actors in Pakistan which are out of control, let's do a cross-border strike maybe, and not like a full missile strike. So, can we have more confidence-building measures? I think that's the first one. I think then you have these back-channel talks between the two countries. Again, both countries have not suspended diplomatic relations, which is great.
Right.
It's not that, there's a Pakistani,
no talks at all. Yeah.
There's a Pakistani embassy and a high commissioner.
Are they expelling diplomats either countries?
They're expelling, but there are still. There is a minimal presence of both countries' diplomatic corps.
There's an office, yeah.
Yeah, there's an office. So typically, before the two heads of state can talk, you need a lot of back channel talks to happen. Because typically the heads of state need to sign. They don't resolve things themselves. Yeah. Those are mainly optics. The paperwork is done, groundwork is done. The job of politicians is essentially to sell whatever they sign to the domestic public. It's not to come up with the nitty-gritties of the treaties. Those are done by bureaucrats, right? So the bureaucrats need to start talking, but that needs a political okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think it's important for both countries to understand this. I don't see Pakistan, at least in my lifetime, Pakistan isn't going anywhere. It's going to be our neighbor, and it's hard for India to be prosperous if you have an antagonistic neighbor and vice versa. So, we'll have to work this through. You think of neighborhoods in the US. How much can you go if it's a broken neighborhood?
I was thinking about this, bro. One of my first observations when I came to America was Indians and Pakistanis lived peacefully. I've never seen any sort of animosity or fights or anything like that. We play in the same cricket teams. We go to the same restaurants, we eat the same foods, and it's
culture.
Why can't we just do that where we come from? It's we're doing it's possible. Anybody that says Indians and Pakistanis can't live peacefully, yes we can. I've lived with Indian people and they've lived with me my whole American life.
There is this really nice, very balanced interview done by this channel in India called The Wire, which involves one Pakistani journalist, one Indian journalist, one Nepali journalist. And at the end, the Nepali journalist was asked this question that, as a non-Indian, non-Pakistani, what do you know, what's your take on sort of summing up? And he says that, look, I'm not Indian, I'm not Pakistani, but I'm South Asian, and all of us are South Asian here, and we share one common value, and that is empathy.
Right.
So there are some common South Asian values which we share, and you know, even if you take that out, I mean, we are neighbors. It's hard to be a glorious neighbor or a glorious sort of state in a bad neighborhood.
It's hard.
So and you know, if you have to if you have to keep your army always on the sort of the tenterhooks about a military operation, it's hard to do
That's
that.
a good point.
It's so I think it's important that, you know, we need de-escalation. We need and this is not something which is different from the Indian government's standpoint, at least. I mean, the Indian government's official position is, you know, we would like peace with Pakistan. So I think it's not something which is different from the government standpoint. You know, I think the government also acknowledges that you know, that Pakistan is a reality. I think multiple leaders have said that you know, we can't wish away Pakistan. We'll have to, you know, work around with it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Wonderful
insights.
chatting.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.